Yeah, you know, I bought the Blu-ray edition. Literally like a week before I found out that it was coming to Netflix. That's well, this is better. Welcome to the Avathlon, named TBD, where I cover a bunch of stuff, all relating to Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of my favorite shows of all time. I binge it at least once a year. And what better time to talk about it now that it's on Netflix and all of you can watch it again. Now, what constitutes a good pilot episode or opening? 1, helps build the world. 2, helps establish characters. 3, establishes tone, and of course is entertaining as hell. Now, what makes a bad opening? A bad opening doesn't really help or do any of those things. Now, don't get me wrong, a opening scene doesn't have to be expository. For instance, The Matrix has a really great opening scene and leaves the viewers in suspense, which adds to the story, but that's the key part. It adds to the story. Because the main character doesn't know much about the world, and we learn the world through his eyes, it is totally okay to have an opening like that. A bad opening can even have those things where they establish character, they establish setting with boring ass narration. Mostly I find in animated films where the protagonist is doing something and all of a sudden it freeze frames and then it's like, this is me. And I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart.
Now, this video is mainly focusing on Avatar: The Last Airbender's pilot episode, which are technically episodes 1 and 2 put together. It was an hour-long premiere. But if you want me to go over good opening scenes like Baby Drivers and Star Wars and Guardians of the Galaxy, please let me know in the comments below. We will get to it after the Avathlon ends. Avatar's intro is as iconic to it as Star Wars' title crawl. Within 40 seconds, we are told everything that we need to know about the world and basically what to expect. We are told about the power system, bending, we are told about the 100 Years War, and we are told about the Avatar. And we can tell this is already going to be a kind of Chosen One-esque type of archetypes. We're also told of the protagonist and the antagonist just off of world building alone. We can tell that the Fire Nation is going to be the main enemy of the show, and that basically anybody who's not Fire Nation is going to be a protagonist. In the very first intro, we get some more additional information about Sokka and Katara, but then after that, we get more information about Aang.
You just sneezed and flew 10 feet in the air.
When the intro ends, we open up to Katara and Sokka on a canoe fishing. So already from the opening dialogue, we can tell the relationship between the two. We already knew that they were brother and sister and that their father and most of the men, if not all of the men, I can't remember which, went off to war to fight the Fire Nation. We can tell from their opening dialogue that Sokka is proud, he's gonna be the comic relief, and he's sexist, obviously. Katara is amiable and is a mother figure and is very responsible and is kind of idealistic. Sokka also makes fun of bending, and we see that he actually cannot use bending. Katara is kind of a novice at bending, so at least in the village of theirs, like, bending is sort of a lost art. Not everyone can use it. Although we find out later that this is completely not the case outside the village. There's a bunch of people that can use bending. But while Sokka isn't a bender, we see that he's not, like, you know, completely useless. When they get caught in that rip current, he is able to navigate between the icebergs for some time before actually crashing the canoe. So he's actually kind of a skillful sailor. Sailor? There's no sails on a canoe. Rower? Canoeer. Then they get to the iceberg and we see Sokka's protectiveness come out. We also see Sokka's protectiveness when he wants to banish Aang from the village. We also find out that Sokka's not very trusting of people, and he only starts trusting Aang once Aang kind of comes back and helps out the village when Zuko comes and attacks. He definitely vilifies the Fire Nation, as most people seem to do in this show, and that also shows the scars of the 100 Years War. Katara, on the other hand, we see she has a bit of a temper when she's disrespected, as we see how she opens the iceberg with her water bending. We're also told that Katara has chores to do, meaning that she's, like, once again, a very responsible person. We also learned that everyone in the village is very cynical about the whole war, that there's no hope left. Katara is really the only hopeful one left in the village. We also learned that Katara wants to desperately learn waterbending, and she asks Aang to teach her waterbending. Aang says that he cannot teach her waterbending because he's an airbender, and airbenders can't teach waterbending, so Aang proposes the idea of going to the North Pole, and then she can learn how to waterbend. Gee, I wonder what the overarching plot of the story is going to be. We get to see what kind of person Aang is just right from the opening question. He doesn't ask, when he's free from the iceberg, he doesn't ask, where the hell am I? Or What day is it, he asks. You wanna go penguin sledding? His childlike nature and naivete is kind of further exemplified through him playing with the kids in the village and of course during his fights. He kind of toys around with his enemies, not taking it like completely seriously. Of course, we see when he goes and sacrifices himself, not sacrifices, but lets himself get captured for the safety of the village, that he does have the capability of taking things seriously. But he doesn't want to like seriously hurt anyone, so he kind of toys around with his enemies, you know? And that leads into how he is a very gentle person and doesn't really want to hurt anyone. He's a pacifist. We also straight up learn that Aang just doesn't want to be the Avatar. And when Katara is like, yo, you know, the whole world has been waiting for you for like 100 years. You think we gotta get going, you know? And then Aang is just like, yeah, but I wanna ride the koi whip first. We then learn that it's Aang's destiny to first learn water, and then earth, and then fire. Gee guys, I wonder what the overarching plot is gonna be. However, his kind and gentle nature are traits that Avatar should have, and we see his hidden potential once he waterbends his way away from the Fire Nation ship. Once they break the iceberg, we are introduced to Zuko and Uncle Iroh, the goat. We can tell from their attire and the ship immediately that they are Fire Nation, and that Zuko has a bit of a temper, he's impatient, and that he's trying to restore his honor! While his uncle is sort of nonchalant about the whole thing. I mean, the dude literally sleeps through an entire fight of Aang escaping the ship. And while Zuko is shown to be temperamental and impatient, we do see that he's also very dedicated and determined, because he's been practicing, he says himself, he's been practicing years and years and years, meditating and training to fight the Avatar, which he does, and then he gets his butt whooped. Them Tempur-Pedics are dangerous, you know, them memory foams are hard as rocks sometimes, you know what I mean? Tone is simple, a comedic action adventure show with magic.
Why is it that every time you play with magic water, I get soaked?
It's not magic, it's water bending.
Bending. And of course, martial arts. The world, however, we do get a lot of information about, even if it's just limited. Just from like the first 40 seconds, once again, that intro, and the way the village reacts to Zuko and his men coming up to the village, we already see that the Fire Nation has way better technology. They are a force to be reckoned with. Everyone hates them, everyone fears them. So much so that they forbid anyone to access an abandoned Fire Nation ship. Like, it's abandoned. What's it gonna do? It just so happened that Zuko was in the area when the flare went off. Who else is that gonna go to? This is kind of like the stormtroopers before people realized that they can't really hit anything. The scars of the 100-Year War are also prominently shown in Sokka, in Katara, and in the way of the village is apparently there hasn't been fun in a while. There's just been no fun ever since the men left and the Fire Nation raided the village. Just everyone's been really cynical and down. We're also shown much of the power system. Aang uses airbending not to just fight, but also for mobility, to like open hatches, jump, run faster. We also see that, of course, it takes different schools of thought in order to master one element or the other. An airbender could not teach a waterbender waterbending, of course. It just doesn't work. This is later on proven to be kind of like, it meshes the lines a little bit when Uncle Iroh teaches Zuko about lightning, but we'll get to that later in another video. And from the fighting, we see that fatigue actually comes from performing the martial arts actions themselves in order to bend fire or bend air, not actually from the bending itself. It's not like a mana bar or something. And so there you have it, the pilot episode of the Avathlon. Next time, catch us later for doing a video on world building. Whether or not I split it up into 4 sections and do a video on each nation is completely up in the air. But look for just one video on the entire world of Avatar. I'm going to squeeze it in as much as I can. Hope you all learned something about what makes a good opening and how a good opening should establish character, world, and, you know, help set up the story. Yeah, that's all I got, guys. Peace.